All right, so we're on the last day of our Columbus investigation, and it was a challenge. I'm fully aware it was a challenge, and I appreciate people working so hard and trying to think for themselves to come up with this. And even me as a history teacher, even me as an older person, it's hard to fully wrap my mind around Columbus in terms of who he was as a figure, whether good, bad, somewhere in between. I'm going to give you my thoughts. You can take them or leave them. Again, your thoughts are your own. Now, in class, I had you read this on your own. Whether or not you did this or not, I don't know. But for now, I'm going to read this because I think it's important to put Columbus in a broader construct. And it reads, our human narrative began with small hunting and gathering bands that left Africa and spread throughout the world. When Homo sapien arrived in Argentina, it marked the end of hunting and gathering as the dominant way to live. This led to the rise of agriculture or agrarian and eventually civilizations forming along the four river valley civilizations. Following these, the classical world established the framework and important cultural precedents for future people. When the Silk Road and trans-Saharan trade routes were established, the world increased its hemispheric interactions greatly. This is what we've learned about prior to Columbus, I hope. A little step back. This left our world interregionally divided along the four world zones of Afro-Eurasia, the Americas, Australasia, and the Pacific. What made our human story global for the first time was the arrival of Columbus to North America in 1492. That is the most important sentence. This is the global world of today, and it started in 1492 when Columbus arrived. Now, many historians, and I would consider you a historian at this point, amateur historians, budding historians, many historians argue this was the most significant event in human history. And this very well may be true. Whether it was for better or worse, we've just researched. Now, one thing I am appreciative of are people who have changed their initial hypotheses, because it's easy to have a hunch. It's easy to go with what you think you know or what you've learned in the past or some other teacher told me or my parent told me. That's only going to take you so far. As we get older, as we get more academic, you have to change your opinion based on evidence. And I'm hoping you're doing that. And a lot of people did, and I appreciate that. Now, in terms of research, this is, a drill where you were learning how to cite and looking at various perspectives. And I appreciated people who saw patterns where they said, I had four people say the same thing. Well, I can hang my hat on that a lot better if one person says it. Now, in terms of my thoughts, the turning point, for better or for worse, it depends on who you talk to, depends on where you are. Now, in terms of all of these historical reasoning devices, I would argue there's a couple big ones. Now, in particular, science, technology, and innovation. Once Columbus got on the scene, other European nations felt that they had to explore as well. So this pushed advancements in naval travel. It pushed advancements in firearms. It pushed advancement in accounting and economics and getting goods back and forth. And that, you can argue, was sparked by Columbus. Now, economic changes might be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in terms of when you go to the grocery store today and you buy food, there's a lot of that food that came from the Eastern Hemisphere naturally, which came to the West and vice versa. And this world of today is allowing us to have huge industries based upon these commodities. And we eat better, and I'm going to argue we're going to live better because of that Columbian exchange that that began with Columbus in 1492. Now, in terms of culture, we saw a shift for European hegemony because when the Europeans did arrive into the Americas, smallpox decimated the populations, and what we saw is a shift of European hegemony. Language is illustrative of that. If you look at the Americas, the languages that are spoken on two continents, South and North America, are primarily French, English, Spanish, and Brazil speaks Portuguese. These are the four countries that are still very much with us, and the culture changed. Now, with these nations, they bring Christianity, they bring a way of governing, and it's a major, major cultural shift, and you can lump intellectual movements with that way of thinking. Now, in terms of the context of the time, was Columbus appropriate or not? I really don't know, because that's a fairly subjective to what you consider was appropriate at the time. I'm looking forward to reading your responses. And again, I don't want to bias you too much. I'm just trying to give you my 2 cents in terms of what I think. Now, once we got past all these citations and whatnot, we got to this portion, and I gave you the first paragraph because that is the most important one. If you can establish a strong first paragraph, the rest of the paper flows. So first paragraph, in 1492, Columbus arrives in North America. That's a fact. That's as factual as I can be. This made the world a... Now, if I were on your side of the desk, I would say different. Now, different doesn't signify value, good or bad, but certainly different because of those things I just mentioned. Okay, and I've already read a few of them. Wide variety of the 3 things, but whatever the 3 reasons you base, these become paragraph 2, 3, and 4. Now, where people are struggling the most, and I think people struggle in general with this, is looking at the other side. Now, if you feel strongly about an issue, you better know how the other side thinks. And just in listening to everyday news, you have very right-wing, very left-wing, who sound off with their own slogans and their own thoughts, but they never really give credence to the other side, and therefore we don't have a lot of progress because people get very mired in their way of thinking. Know your opponent and know why they're wrong. And I'll tell you what, if you can really pick apart your opponent's argument, I don't care if it's a history paper, I don't care if you're having an argument in a coffee house, whatever the case may be, strong thinkers, people who can argue well and reason well, should know what the other side is saying before it comes out of their mouth and being able to squash it. And then once you say, here's what the opposing people who think differently than me think, I still feel, and then you just restate those things, okay? So Columbus, regardless of how you feel about him, and the range is huge, from brave hero to genocidal rapist monster. I'll leave that up to you, but one thing I want to get across, when Columbus arrived in 1492, the world became global, and it set in motion a world that we live in today. You cannot explain the world of today without Columbus's arrival, okay? So I'm looking forward to reading all of yours. Again, please email it to me. There is my email. Hard deadline because the semester's over, and that's it. And again, I want to reiterate one last point. Your free thinking is more important than anything else. And I want you to think for yourself. If I can get anything across to you or encourage you to do, it is that. So good luck. I look forward to reading them, and thanks for listening.